and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where we improvise everything all of the time. I am, of course, Levi,
I'm Reed.
and we are here to tell you a story. What story element did you have, Reed?
Magic system.
Magic system. I have government type. I think you should go first.
Okay. Well, the word magic, of course, changes from time to time. In the Industrial Revolution, some of the people working the big machines thought that there was some kind of demon in there stealing
Right,
their jobs,
right.
because they didn't understand how the gears worked and how it all, but so there's a question of whether what I'm going to be calling the magic system is actually magic or uh, techno- technological.
Right.
I'm calling it celestial harmonics. And it started with communications, kind of a means to instantly connect with a base on one of Jupiter's moons. And it was kind of in the beginning of reaching out, from Earth. And a lot of things had taken place where it looked like we had the means to really take a stab at checking out our neighborhood, so to speak.
Right.
And anyway, it seems that certain individuals can sense conditions unique to planets or suns or objects sufficiently large or, energized, so to speak, that I'm going to use some words here that aren't, none of them are exactly accurate, but, like a planet, the energy of a planet would like emit or broadcast or display various physical or mental or emotional or spiritual force specific to each entity.
Interesting.
And once discovered, it started out with somebody was monitoring communications, and they began to anticipate because they connected into something, and none of the words worked. It wasn't waves or particles or they had been
Beams.
they had been playing around with like from Ender's Game, the Ansible kind of thing,
Quantum entanglement stuff.
quantum entanglement, but it wasn't quite getting it done because it wasn't something that just anybody operating the equipment could connect up to. It seemed that there were certain people that had sort of an ability to connect, and this really it grew in scope for different things. Once they discovered these tendencies, they set up listening stations where people that had displayed the ability to catch on or get it, they were sending up, to kind of amplify slash clarify the data, and they were exploring different technological means for this, but it didn't seem that this was something that, the farther away it was, the weaker the signal was, so to speak. It
Right.
wasn't like, a light bulb just fans out, and the farther away you are from the source of the light, the dimmer or the weaker the energy that is being emitted. This isn't like energy emitted. This is just like my being is being detected by another being, and the life force or the spiritual, mental, emotional, whatever physical energy is just connected somehow. So they began to use it like, well, first of all, started testing. Scientists got involved trying to test sensitivity, and you know, they had this set up, and then they set up training centers to see if this
Taught.
tendency could be taught
Yeah.
or cultured or enhanced through practice, study,
Right.
training, whatever. And then
Right.
they began to see the advantage for navigation. So navigation hubs were set up. And in some cases, you might remember like the story of I can't remember the name of the lady that wrote the Dragon Quest series, the Dragon Riders of
And
Pern,
McCaffrey.
Anne McCaffrey. She wrote a series of books about the Rowan, who they had a system of interplanetary navigation where they used people that had literally telekinetic powers that could help guide and navigate, faster than light Uh,
Sounds like a story based on Dune.
yeah, well, yeah, I like yet another story based on Dune. So so anyway, that's this notion, this kind of celestial harmonics. One of the things that uh, you would get this data, so to speak, from distant solar systems with sufficient activity that could be identified. So for threat identification, opportunity for trade, commerce, uh, you know,
Right. Right.
that kind of thing. It really changed uh, once once these people that had the that knew what to look for, they began to see potential, uh, shall we say, extraterrestrial contact opportunities. So
Cool.
so anyway, how does that fit for a magic system?
That's really good. It's yeah, you're right. It's kind of like a science, kind of like a magic,
Yeah.
kind of like a human evolution sort of stage thing.
Hmm.
Um, that sounds great. Mine is also a little bit more world buildy, so I'll throw some ideas out, and then we can kind of maybe set up a little bit of premise or decide if this is gonna be a short one. So obviously, the humanity is interstellar, right?
Right.
To some capacity, we have traveled. Our solar system is being populated as we speak,
Right.
right? There are people being sent out to other, someone was sent out 50 years ago to the Andromeda galaxy,
Yeah.
a big shuttle full of 3,000 people, right? That kind of stuff.
Yep.
Um, Now, with the introduction of meteor mining, moon mining, and the ever expanding space, the world, humanity is seeing a population explosion,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so many more people and because times are so desperate, people are having a lot more children. So we're set to 10x the population in the next 100 years, which I don't know if that's really, really big. It seems really big, 10 times the population,
Right.
you know? Actually, yeah, that actually sounds really big. So, yeah. And through all of this, as there are several world governments, several extraplanetary governments, and several, what's the word? Several corporations and conglomerates that have sort of risen to the place of world governments, right? In power and
Yeah.
scope and influence. And what's happened is that was about 5 years of Cold War, about 2 years of war, and now we're living in a post-war sort of area. But the interesting thing about so I have government type, and the interesting thing about this government type is all of the large movers and shakers are at a gridlock, right? Everyone has their nukes pointed at each other. So, like, way up here in the atmosphere, the big brained ideas, everyone has their nukes pointed at each other, both physically and metaphorically.
Right.
Everyone, the war got so hot so quickly that everyone is kind of sitting there pointing guns at each other's head at the big top level.
Kind of like the whole mutual assured destruction
Right.
threat.
Now, one down from that, there's some peaceful interaction between some of the smaller, but then all the way down to like the civilian level, people have adjusted to the fact that their country is at war with each other.
Right.
There's an interior currency, there's a there's an exterior currency that's traded,
Yeah.
you know. Um for some countries and some organizations, nationalistic, patriotic. Patriotism is really highly encouraged, and there's certain people that they just won't deal with. Like the North American conglomerate, right, which composes all of the governments that were in were in America, right, the Americas,
Right.
right. They wiped off the face of the planet Alaska, Australia's government in a preemptive strike because Australia was going to attack them. So
Okay.
they wiped them off. So now, if you're Australian, it doesn't matter how good a deal an American brings to you.
Yeah.
You'll never take it. So there are some factors of the war which have seeped through, but by and large, what people have learned to do is new and interesting ways of conducting business have arisen in lieu of this head pointed at everyone's, you know. Space stations now are mandated to be able to be broken apart into their warring factions. Should they ever, I mean, it hasn't happened in a couple of years, but should they ever uh, decide to fight again,
Right.
old warships have been joined together, and technically all the warheads are still armed and pointing at each other, but it's been like 15 years since we've actually fought, that it's kind of the people, the colonels and the things have gotten fat off of their big ships and stuff, and who knows if they've sold all the fissionable material out of their
Yeah.
nukes or not. No one quite knows. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't.
Mhm.
So that's the government as it sits right now. So there's lots of like in Snow Crash, which is a great book you should read. There's lots of checkpoints. You know,
Okay, okay.
you kind of walk through this area and you go into a shop, right? And it's kind of Asian themed,
Mhm.
you know, and it checks your passport when you walk in. And like, are you allowed into New Hong Kong?
Yeah.
And if you're not, all the prices triple. It's like you can come in, but
Yeah, you're gonna pay.
or you come over and you walk into the Americas. It's like, well, I'm sorry, you're not allowed in here.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Well, because your passport said that you are you carry water for the Australian Rebels Alliance, and
Okay.
it's like, so there's lots of these things where people still interact with each other, but they kind of joke about it now that at any time they could be ordered to like fight each other immediately. But it's enough time, I'd say about 15 years have passed, that people are starting to kind of make a new kind of government that
Yeah.
operates apart, but in somewhat informed by this kind of the larger governments of the and corporations of the world.
I see like a haggling going on, like, well, I need such and such kind of a thing. Well, I got 15 cases of that stuff. Okay, well, you know, what do you need to get for it? He says something that's like, what does your passport say? You know, and it's like,
Yeah,
you know,
I have 10 trillion Australian dollars. Nah, man. I don't need those on my
yeah, yeah.
books.
I can sell it to you, but then I'd have to kill you, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So just this concept of warring perfectly matched forces, read when they come together
Yeah.
and they're at a standstill, but that place in between,
Yeah.
new things happen,
Right.
right? Strange new things. Life is made,
Yes.
you know. Life isn't made in the military stockpiles. The stories happen where they clash together. And if they're perfectly matched and they can never run over each other, then
Right.
that is just festering. It's just compressing and
Yeah.
festering. And that is what we're seeing here. The
Yeah.
world changing faster than people
Hmm.
can keep up with and in ways that people don't understand.
Right. And it adds s- complex stressors to the uh human experience.
Right, right. I can see this what are these people called? Do you have a name for them? The what do you call it? Angelic
Well, celestial harmonics,
celestial
the people that
harmonics.
are able to the though they use the word hear. Can you hear? Can you hear?
Okay.
Can you hear? It's like, can you hear the harmonics? Can you hear the music?
Do
It
you hear what I
Yeah,
hear?
kind of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and it's part of it. At first they thought the base on the Jupiter moon was specific because of mineral exploitation. There was some what would they call it, uh, uh, exotic metals
Right.
that made the ability to create spacecraft that could handle the stress of hyper fast speeds and hyper
Right.
strong, hyper stress, strong in light, put it that way.
Right. Right.
When the ability to transport you want to keep mass down, but you got to keep strength up. And anyway, these exotic metals that they found out in the solar system originally was is what fueled the whole industry of building spacecraft that could take
Right.
like a 3,000 uh, man settlement expedition, into deep space, for example, or whatever.
Oh, Reed, I had this idea as you're talking about this that the people who can hear this resonance, um, they they can use uniform molecular structures as an antenna.
Right,
So like they could like take their gloves off because they'd always wear gloves because otherwise they would be bombarded with things, and they can put them on like the hull of a ship and then turn that whole ship into not a tuning fork but the opposite of a tuning fork,
right,
you know, an antenna really, and then
yeah,
amplify. So not only are these is this exotic material really valuable for creating ships, it also, because of how uniform it is, creates some of the cleanest and clearest antennas.
right,
So it makes
yeah,
sense that why the rich and powerful have it and own it, and because they need their listeners or whatever to be able to be the most powerful.
yeah. Listening posts, it was the word that was used, but
Right.
hearing isn't the obviously it isn't nobody's hearing things, but it and it isn't like waves like me that you hear music, and sound
Right.
waves, but
Right.
yet there's something that takes place, and it's not entirely clear scientific.
That makes sense. you know, I had this idea that there's a listening post. One of the listening posts is a really deep, it goes through almost all the way through a planet. It's a super dense vein of an
Right,
ore.
right. Yeah, see?
You
That
know, I kind of have this idea where a guy comes into a room, kind of
mhm,
opens and there's low light and there's this table and it looks like it's made of solid stone,
right,
right? And he kind of comes in and he takes his gloves, his black gloves off. He's wearing stuff on every single part of his body so that none of it ever comes in contact with
mhm,
anything. And he takes gloves off and he just puts his hands down on this table, like 5 feet across,
right,
you know, and he can like feel as his awareness kind of
right.
expands.
And there's like I say, these things, these listening posts pick up the I'm gonna use the word resonance, although that really isn't the right word, of like a distant planet, for example, that
Right,
has
right,
that is magnifying all this mental and emotional and spiritual. I'm going to use the word energy, but that's not quite right either. That 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 identifies this is a planet that is inhabited, and
right,
you then you have the situation where you have a couple of planets that go to war with each other, and all of a sudden these readings, so to speak, are kind of like go off the
yeah,
charts
yeah.
because there's so much more activity taking place in these celestial harmonics.
Now,
How to use it, that's the secret. Like there's some of these operators, the hearers, at first it was just used for communications, like I said.
yeah, I can see there being multiple sort of thought processes on how to use them.
Yeah,
Some people use them, they submerge them in fluid and hook them full of machines and turn them into basically pass throughs for computers,
yeah,
using their sensitivity to this, to feed data into a computer. Other people have leaders who are these people,
hmm,
you know, um,
weapons.
weapons.
Like I think of uh
Well, I suppose if you can find and if you can sense human beings, it's not just planets. If you come into a system and you can basically sense where people are,
right,
you can basically say that asteroid field right there is full of an armada.
right,
That's really strategically advantageous.
yeah, Yeah, I was thinking like Wheel of Time, like balefire. It doesn't diminish like you shoot a cannonball and it immediately as you fire it out of the barrel of the cannon and immediately begins to lose kinetic energy.
Right. Right.
But balefire, was banned because it nothing stops it. It doesn't decrease in its potency just because it's going through like 30 feet of rock.
Right.
Yeah.
It only depends on how strong how strong the weave that you put behind it is.
Right. Right.
Right. So is there some offensive use for this? Is
Well,
there some kind of because right now it seems like the people are only really receivers, you
well,
know?
yeah, and this is the thing I that they're messing around with, like
Right. Right.
listening posts and projecting posts.
Ah,
You see, and so it isn't like sending a radio wave. Although it kind of is.
right. I would say maybe you have positive and negatives.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Like, right, you have two sides of the same coin. No one can be a positive and a negative at
Uh
once,
huh.
and positives and negatives can't stand each other, right? One's a one's a sender and one's a receiver, right?
Right.
Negatives hate positives. They hate how they are, they hate who they are.
Hmm.
They no, that wouldn't work. It's positive and negatives attract, positive and positives
Repel.
repel.
Yeah.
So they like positive and negatives like each other, but positives hate other positives and negatives hate other negatives.
Yeah.
And it's not magnetism. It's just what they've called it because they just call it that because of the similarities to magnetism, you
Yeah.
know. So there's some people can take in signal and some people can push out signal. Well, everyone pushes out a signal
Yeah.
whether they want to or not.
Right.
But these people can modulate or kind of
Hmm.
intentionally direct signal in a direction or not.
Immediately my mind went to speaking back to the mother of all ideas, Dune. You know, the voice modulator. you
You
know.
mean Dune from David Lynch?
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't in the book.
Oh, okay.
It was good
Yeah.
ish.
Ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. So we have the magic system really worked down, and we have a world in sort of this kind of gridlock turmoil. Should we call it a day here and come back at it again next week?
Yeah. That sounds good. Then maybe Seth could join us.
Yeah, I think so. Probably next week we'll be able to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, if you think we are on a good track, this is going to be a winner, send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or at us on Twitter at getsbettercast. If you have an idea that you think would make a better story than this one we're making here, I would say just wait. It gets better.